All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Regenstrief Educational Insights and Learning Series. I'm Susan Hickman. I'm the director of the IU Center for Aging Research here at Regenstrief, and I'm delighted to see this very full room, and hopeful we have a similar crowd online. Today represents the first of a series of overviews of each of our research centers within the Institute, and the Center for Aging Research is going first and presenting this overview of our portfolio, our work, who we are, what we do, and it's, I think you'll see in a month or two, we have another one from another presentation from HSR, and then CBMI coming. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to give you just a rundown of our center, kind of highlights and numbers to give you a sense of what we're doing. And then I have invited our Director of Center Operations, hang on, I'll go to our agenda, Joan Showalter will give an overview of our work on our supporting our professional staff. We then have Sikandar Khan and Babar Khan who will share an overview of their portfolio focused on delirium and ICU recovery. Kathleen Unroe will be sharing an overview of the portfolio focused on palliative care. And then Noll Campbell and I think Rich is actually online and not in person, will be providing an overview of the brain health portfolio. We're going to try to do all of this in 50 minutes, so wish us luck. But we are really excited to have an opportunity to share this today. And I will also just say, this is not everything we're doing. We're just highlighting a few areas. And so we have some really great folks whose work is not represented here. So I want to acknowledge that. So the mission of the IU Center for Aging Research at Regenstrief is to improve the healthcare and self-care of older adults through research. And our vision is to become the nation's leading academic research center focused on the health and well-being of older adults. I would say we've actually, I think, kind of achieved this vision. Maybe we need to brush it up, but I would say unquestionably we are one of the top centers in the country. We are known for our work nationally and internationally, and that is due to the incredible work of our investigators. Our research shares some commonalities, including that it can be applied very quickly and efficiently to improve health and patient experience, as well as reduce costs. This work is effective in part because it originates from the needs of older adults, their families, and the people who serve them. And we really do lead the field in thinking about the environment for older adults and those who care for them. I will say I'm talking a lot about older adults, but we really do have a lifespan perspective in the work that we do as well. So our work is not exclusively on people age 65 and older. We have a number of studies that are more broadly inclusive, and I think that'll become clear as we move through and describe our work, you know, that sort of boundary of what's older is stretched out a little bit as we think about aging and what contributes to the aging process. We have a number of themes in the work that we do, and that includes all that you're seeing on the screen here. I will not read it, but I think you know, it is really a cohesive group despite the disparity, and we have a lot of that appears just glancing at that, but we have a lot of interconnectedness within the center and work together in supporting each other in the work that we're doing. Our leadership team is comprised of the individuals you see on the screen. So the associate directors are Nicole Fowler and Babar Khan. Joan Showalter is our director of center operations. And then we also are very fortunate. We have been able to rely on Tricia Clark, who has been our finance for post-award management for many years, for which we are enormously grateful. Anna Higby is one of our senior research managers, and she plays a really integral role in supporting our teams. And then we have some incredible professional staff, our PAs, Kalita Gordon, who's also our center coordinator, Ayana Buchanan, and Jordan Kalt. And special shout out to Jordan. They prepared the slides today, so thank you, Jordan. And as I said, We're a big group. We have about 45 professional staff in addition to 20 investigators. And this slide, I realized we need to update this slightly because we have one new investigator that we just welcomed into the center, Dr. Meredith Green, who comes to us from the University of California, San Francisco. We are so thrilled to have her join us as an associate professor in the Division of General Internal Medicine and Geriatrics, as well as an investigator here in IUCAR. She comes to us with a National Institute on Aging Beeson Award, which, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is a really prestigious recognition from the National Institute on Aging on people who are leaders in their field. We have a number of IUCAR investigators who have had or have Beeson Awards, including Sikandar, who you'll hear from today, who's a current Beeson awardee, Kathleen Unroe, who is a prior Beeson awardee, in addition to Malaz Bustani and Chris Callahan. We're really excited to welcome Meredith. Her work focuses on living and aging with HIV and does a lot of really fascinating and important implementation science. Also shares she is an Indy native, so we are happy to welcome her back home and give her a home here. So one of the things that's really the bread and butter of the work that we do at the Institute are grants. And I am sure you have all, in your various roles, have some interaction and awareness of this. Either you're working on a grant, you're helping support organizing meetings for grants, you're managing the budgets or the finances. But I will say this is a really an important area for us in the center, and we spend a lot of time ensuring that we're tracking our productivity and our success. And we have a fairly high productivity rate in terms of submissions. Our investigators are incredibly generative and on an annual basis submit a large number of proposals and with a good track record of success. You see here about a third of our proposals submitted in the fiscal year 23 were funded. It is really quite a machine that I'm very proud of, the work that all of our investigators do. This is just a smattering of some of these new grants that you see on the screen. We have a number of collaborations that are with other investigators on campus, but also across the country. I think that really reflects our strong national reputation and that people seek us out and are willing and eager to partner with us on submissions. So a number of projects that have been funded recently. And I want to highlight Dan Clark's work. Dr. Dan Clark does really interesting work in the area of social determinants of health. We haven't invited him to share at a REILS session. I believe he's scheduled in February, so he'll talk a little bit more about some of these projects and then the work that he does with Eskenazi to support their social determinants of health work and evaluation. Two of those projects include this MAT, the Mind, Diet, and Aerobic Training. And then he also has a really interesting evaluation opportunity partnership with an Anthem-funded grant on connecting older Hoosiers with healthful food. So I'm looking forward to when we get to hear more about those projects, as well as Forks, which he co-leads with Rich Holden. A few more investigators. A couple of these, Kathleen is featured, and I don't know if we have these on the palliative care slide specifically, but these are both SBIRs that she's partnered with other investigators, including Rich Holden and Josh Vest, who's in CBMI, and then Sikandar, who you'll hear from on his Beeson Award. So, in addition to counting submissions, we have to be thinking about money, and because that is how we pay for everything we do, and it's a really important part of the reality. So these are these are the numbers for our extramural accounts this past year, and then I think the next one, yes, is focused on the funds, and specifically it's focused on what we call indirect cost recovery. Actually, I think. So I don't have my glasses on, and I will have to say that I'm facing a limitation because I think this is money, funding in millions, and then over and above any award we receive indirects, particularly on the NIH funds, which help pay for all the things that you can't cover in a grant. And I think often our professional staff are not always fully cognizant how this mechanism works, but the reasons we're so focused in on NIH NIH funding is multifold, including that it's really a marker of innovation, the work that gets funded, by necessity and definition, must be innovative in the field and moving the field forward. There's a very rigorous and careful review of these proposals. So when people receive NIH grants, it is a very big deal. It's a big accomplishment. And the other thing is it does help provide sufficient or important funding to help support the infrastructure that enables us to do all the work. So when you write a grant, you don't include money in the budget to pay for the heating and the cooling and the the electricity, right? But the indirect cost recovery helps support those functions, as well as all the other essential staff throughout the Institute, including our grants and contracts and finance teams, HR, et cetera, et cetera. That money is really essential in paying for those critical supports for the work. And the NIH recognizes that by negotiating and providing these indirects. Last year, IUCAR provided $1 million in indirects to the Institute. Additionally, there's another $2.3 million on the university side of those agreements that went to support the university. So again, really critical support. Just a little bit more by the numbers, we have a pretty large NIH portfolio. 35 of our grants are NIH funded, and then we also have a smattering of other kind of federal, commercial, and foundation grants. I also like to every year highlight this in our State of the Center, and so I thought I'd share this here as well. When we talk about grants, we know that they're important in moving the science forward, and that is really what drives our work. They do also have an impact on the broader economy within the state, and this data is collected by United for Medical Research. I think I read that correctly as I'm squinting at my little tiny screen. But they note that every $1 million in NIH funding awarded to Indiana researchers in 2023 created 12.9 jobs. Statewide, NIH funding has generated over $1 billion in economic activity. Nationally, there's $2.64 of economic activity for every $1 in research funding. So, I really like to highlight this to emphasize we are really part of the broader fabric of the community, and in addition to the really critical work we do in generating knowledge. We also spend a lot of effort to disseminate this work as well, and one of the metrics we use for dissemination is publications. IUCAR has a really strong track record of pubs. It looks like we had a knockout year in 23. I think actually we have slight undercounts in the prior years because of some methodology issues and how we were tracking publications, but nonetheless, really strong record of publication and dissemination. I think the other piece that's harder to capture are impact and how we have impact. And I think that's something as an institute we've been talking a lot about. How do we capture that? So for example, a really great exemplar of impact is work that has evolved out of the past 25 years of work done at the center, focused on care and coordination of care for older adults with dementia. Most recently, this work has resulted in some really excited developments at the national level. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services have created a code and a program called GUIDE, which will allow other places around the country to take this model and components that were developed here at the Center for Aging Research, create programs based on them, and then bill and receive compensation for providing these services to support caregivers and persons living with dementia. Chris Callahan and Malaz Bustani, as well as numerous other investigators within the center, have been really integral in building this evidence base that led to this incredible development of this program nationally, and we're really excited to see that impact. I do not have a slide on this today, but there has been a couple of things in the media recently. I encourage you to look at our internal newsletter as well as the feeds on the screens in the building to learn more about the GUIDE program. It was really great to have CMS actually do a site visit here to see how it works in reality with the program that our investigators built over at Eskenazi. And finally, I'll just share, we did have this past year a 25th anniversary celebration. Many of you may have heard of it. I think we've had an incredible first quarter of a century and looking forward to continuing this work, moving into the future with the incredible team of professional staff and investigators that we have within the center and the research infrastructure support we receive from the Institute. I am now going to turn the mic over to our Director of Center Operations, and I'm just going to note I ended a little bit early, amazingly. So
I was checking time. I'm so excited. Thank you. That does not mean I get extra time. So thank you, Susan. And as Susan said, I'm Joan Showalter, the Director of Center Operations here at IUCAR. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our research staff, just give you a thumbnail sketch of the research staff, and then what we do for professional development in IUCAR. So looking at our chart here, we actually have 50 employees. Few of those are research students, very part-time people, but we have about 50 employees, and it shows how they are, in this little graph, how they are divided up by the category of job titles. You may see two little slots that don't have a job title there, right to the right and the left of the blue at the top, the light blue. That's because it's just one person in each. That's me. I'm in my title. And then Kalita Gordon, who is our center coordinator. So we represent 2%, each represent 2% of the staff here. I did that number. So we have a really well-rounded staff. I'm excited that we've had a number of people. When I came here 2 years ago, I was hearing about heavy turnover and people would leave before they had had an opportunity to really grow in their roles. And it seems like we've had some stability. Coming back to the office after COVID, having more of a, feeling more of a stable culture here. I think that's had a lot to do with it. And so we're seeing more people who are advancing up into those research specialist positions and or the research coordinator positions. And that's very exciting to see that growth, that professional growth within our center. As far as the professional development and what we do, it's all fairly, it's not like a real concentrated effort. A lot of it happens very organically. And the first one I want to talk about are our book clubs. And we have book clubs throughout IUCAR, and they are typically conducted at perhaps just the research team level. One research team may have a book that they're reading for a few months, and they meet periodically to discuss that. Or sometimes we'll combine teams, smaller teams, so that they can discuss those. And here's just 8 of the books that have been used in the last 2 years that I know of. I had reached out and asked for a list of those, and I think the list I received, which was not all inclusive, had about 15 on it. So we're getting a lot done in our time together to work together and to learn new things. And as you can see, some of them are specifically about how to conduct research, and then how to take care of your own personal health, social-emotional health, and working as a team. So that has been a really exciting opportunity for our team members. Secondarily, we have some what we call professional development programming, and these are very specifically planned and led professional development events. So I conduct a monthly staff meeting with all of IUCAR staff members, research staff members invited, and we spend really just the first 10 or 15 minutes doing some announcements, some shout outs to people, and then the bulk of the meeting is professional development of one type or another. So here you can see the different types of trainings that we've done in there, and I encourage staff to participate in that training because it is a professional development learning opportunity to present. They don't need me coming up and doing all of them all of the time. And I think we've had some really great presentations by staff and participation in the learning. That's been really fun to do. And then we do have a supervisors group, and so anyone who is at that research coordinator position or above is a member of our monthly supervisors meeting. And Emily Burke, who I think she probably is online, leads that now in terms of the programming and helping decide what we are going to do for presentations. So this is really geared towards what are the issues, what is training that our supervisors need. So HR issues is a big one. A lot of people come into this position, they've never supervised another individual before, so we want to help train them in that. We talk a lot and are very open about mental health in the workplace and how to maintain a good mental health status here. Research compliance, and then additional professional development topics. And then some other kind of one-off trainings that we've had over the last, most of these have been just over the last year, is in 2022, I led I think it was a 6-part SOCR exam prep series, and we had about 6 people who were pretty regular in attending. And I think out of that, we had 3 people who then took the exam and passed, so that was exciting. And that was offered to both, we had people from IUCAR and HSR who attended those. We've had one of our staff members has done some trainings on scientific writing for our staff members, and that's been very exciting for them. And then also he did a couple of presentations on creating a scientific poster for conferences. So here are some pictures of our staff members from the GSA conference that was held here in Indianapolis last year. It's very exciting to have them participate. We had, I believe, 9 or 10 poster sessions by staff members, so a very high turnout, and I am very happy that we can offer those opportunities for people to grow professionally and provide them that support for that. And I think that's the end of mine. There we go. Looks like Dr. Khan is up.
Hi, everybody, and thank you very much, Susan, for letting us provide a little overview of what we do. I'm going to start us off, but my mentor, Babar Khan, is here as well, and he will be finishing up the slides. So I'm actually going to take you all to the intensive care unit. And I'm going to start by telling you a little story. This was published in the Indy Star, so I'm not sharing any private details. But I wanted to start with a story of a 25-year-old medical student. Her name is Yoleti, and she was a daughter of a very prominent CMO at a local health system who was critically ill and in our surgical ICU at Methodist on full life support, including lung bypass machine. And this happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. And you'll notice that even though I'm an investigator in the Center for Aging Research, I'm actually showing you a picture of a 25-year-old. Because as Susan said earlier, our work really does transcend all types of age ranges. And what she explained in this news story is that when she was on life support, she was so weak she could barely move her arms. And the nurse in the ICU would come in and tell her where she was and what was going on. And just a few moments later, Yoleti would completely forget what had happened and what she was told. So delirium or an acute brain dysfunction can happen even among young and healthy folks. And so really to understand what we do and why we do it, I think it's important to understand what the patients are going through. So nearly 2 million older adults are admitted to the ICU with acute respiratory failure every year. And up to 80% of them can develop delirium, which is a form of acute brain dysfunction. And many of them will also have coma, which is an even more severe form of delirium. And unfortunately, about 40 to 70% of these patients go on to develop mild cognitive impairment or even develop dementia in a few years. And as you know, there are no effective pharmacological treatments for delirium or for dementia. And the ICU is a very scary place. And as you can see here, it can, delirium or the brain dysfunction can really affect anyone, from young patients all the way to older adults. And here on the slide, I'm actually showing you a little bit of data from our studies where the mean age of patients in our ICUs and in those recruited into our studies is 59 years, and 38% are 65 years and older. 45% of patients in our studies tend to be African American, and 21% actually are Hispanic. And it's not just the medical ICU patients who have these bad outcomes. Even in the surgical ICU, which tends to be younger and patients with fewer comorbidities, 26% have ICU delirium. So unfortunately, there's a big connection between acute respiratory failure, critical illness, delirium, and then post-ICU aging. And it spans domains such as cognitive, mental health, and physical function, as well as pain, sleep, quality of life impairments, stress, and caregiver burnout. And so if you think about our lab, there are three big legs to the stool. One is pre-ICU, and our work in trying to identify prediction scores to better identify the patients who will get critically ill or who may develop post-ICU aging. Our ICU work is focused on biobanking and translational biology, connecting the lung and brain, as well as measurement of delirium severity and prognostication of delirium outcomes, and doing clinical trials in the ICU. And then our post-ICU lab within a lab is focused on post-ICU aging, understanding post-ICU aging through biomarkers, conducting ICU survivor clinical trials, and then using all of the fancy technology we have these days to really change outcomes for these patients. So I'm going to turn it over to Babar. He's also going to talk about our two amazing clinics that we have that see these patients.
All right. Well, one of the advantages of having a mentee is to talk about a bunch of stuff before. As you can see, I have these allergies going on and my voice is not that great. So I'm just going to talk about 2 slides here, just give you a brief snapshot of what we did when we started working with ICU survivors. So as you can see on the left-hand side, we started this clinic called the ICU Survivor Critical Care Recovery Center at Eskenazi, which was started in 2011. Because we were looking at all these ICU survivors, they're coming to our pulmonary clinic, and we are finding out all these problems that were not related to their lungs, but more related to their brain and muscle function. So we started looking at models, and at that time, I came in contact with Dr. Bustani, and then learned about the healthy aging brain care model at Eskenazi, and then we borrowed that model and modified it and created a collaborative care services clinic within the senior care center at Eskenazi. So that was the first clinic in the United States for ICU survivorship. And then COVID-19 happened, and then there are all these post-COVID recovery clinics, which were built on similar format as the Critical Care Recovery Center. And now in the United States, we have 28 ICU survivor clinics. The other exciting part is that we worked for many years to have buy-in from IU Health, and then Sikandar Khan came into our lab, and he was able to get buy-in from IU Health Methodist and develop the ICU Survivor Center at Methodist, which is taking care of ICU survivors now getting discharged from University Hospital, Methodist, and also from West. So 2 ICU recovery centers within Indianapolis where the active referral process is going on. And then we thought that when we were seeing those patients in the clinic, and we have a nurse care coordinator working with those with the ICU survivors in the clinic, we thought, well, why can't we just take this intervention to the homes of the patients? Because there were logistic issues for patients to come to the clinic. So we used the model and developed this mobile critical care recovery program on the farther side, where the nurses started going into the homes of the patient and provided recovery services in a clinical trial. Is it? Oh, I thought my time's up. No. Similar to the recovery clinic, those services are being provided at home. The trial has finished recruiting. We are looking at the results of the trial right now. So soon we'll be able to provide you some of the results. The second one, improving the recovery and outcomes every day after the ICU, is focused on older ICU survivors of delirium. It's a pilot feasibility trial to see if we can do exercise interventions at home through a telehealth way. And I mean, like after COVID, everybody's like, oh yeah, you guys are doing telehealth. Well, think about it. That trial started like many years before COVID, so we were pretty far ahead of the curve at that time. And then the third one is the very interesting one, which we are actively recruiting, is how to decrease delirium or acute confusion in the ICU using slow tempo music, which is 60 to 80 beats per minute, and comparing with noise cancellation. And then we're looking at those outcomes at this point. I think I'll stop here and then have Sikandar talk about the last slide, and we'll finish up.
Looks like we have 1 minute left. So my Beeson Career Development Award is actually looking at the relationship between oxidative stress, DNA damage, and delirium duration and severity, as well as 2-year cognitive and physical function outcomes in ICU survivors who specifically have acute lung injury. So it's a very interesting pathway because it connects delirium, dementia, as well as acute lung injury. And finally, we're very fortunate to have been supported by IUCAR for the Indiana COVID-19 recovery program for older adults. We have over 200 patients being followed in the program who've survived COVID, and we have cognitive, physical function, mental health, as well as biomarker data on those patients, so we can look at what their post-COVID aging is going to look like. So thank you very much. That's all I have.
So to do clinical care for older adults, people with complex medical illnesses, you really need an interdisciplinary team. And so my colleagues, Babar and Sikandar, are both pulmonary critical care docs, and I'm a geriatrician, but we have a great interdisciplinary group, which really enriches our research. And that's very important for another one of our focus areas, palliative care. So palliative care is specialized medical care for people with serious illness. And it focuses on relieving the stress and the symptoms of this illness. A lot of our work is focused on people living with dementia and their care partners, although we do other palliative care work as well. Dr. Kristen Lavoie's work is focused on the advanced cancer population. So I've got a whole long list of awards here, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of them in this few minutes of time. You know, Susan, I appreciated you highlighted the work with CMS and the guide model. We are always thinking about what's happening in the policy world. How can we be aligned with where there is energy and focus on that side? And one way that we do that is by paying a lot of attention to big reports that come out and using those to frame our work and push it forward. So there's a National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine April 2022 report that came out on improving quality in nursing homes as a reaction to the devastation of COVID in that setting. But that work certainly highlighted the importance of palliative care training and palliative care programs in that setting. There is also a NASM conference coming up the first week of November on serious illness, and I'm one of the panelists for that meeting. So just to stay with nursing homes, because it's my favorite topic, and if I've got the microphone, I'll be talking about nursing homes. So Uplift is a really cool clinical trial in nursing homes where I'm co-PI with a colleague in a school of social work at the University of Maryland. And we have, I'm looking at the team, we have recruited all 16 of our nursing homes for this project. We will hit our recruitment target of 640 nursing home residents with moderate to advanced dementia for this project. So we're in the throes of implementation and data collection, and it's been a lot. Uplift has been a heavy lift, but I think it's going to yield a lot of good things. The Approaches project, where Susan and I are co-PIs, we worked with 131 nursing homes in multiple states. Half of those, it was a pragmatic trial, cluster randomized controlled trial. It's so hard. Can I talk about it in the past tense? I'd like to talk about it in the past tense. The implementation phase is in the past tense. If we can get our data from Medicare, then we'll be able to move into the analysis, fully into the analysis phase of that project. But it was an impactful one. We trained 77 frontline nursing home staff in advanced care planning, and those staff did 5,700 advanced care planning conversations that they documented in the record. Bet they did others too that they didn't document, but 5,700 that we can track, and we've got all the details about. So Approaches is one of the very first pragmatic clinical trials that the NIA funded. And there's been a lot of interest and excitement of these pragmatic clinical trials. There's about a $60 million project, the Impact Collaboratory, which is a U54, which is led out of Brown and Harvard. And several of us in the center are involved in that project. So Lexi Torkey, Chris Callahan, and I all have leadership roles on cores in Impact. But now we also have investigators who have funding via Impact. So Jennifer Carnahan has a pilot. I mean, Nicole, it's all been announced and everything. I know it's been in the works forever. Nicole Fowler with Lexi is leading a dissemination project as well through Impact. So lots of money flowing towards pragmatic trials, supporting people living with dementia and their care partners, and we are an important part of that effort. I will highlight Greg Sachs's In Peace trial. This is a trial for people with advanced dementia and their care partners at home. And during COVID, they were able to successfully recruit over 200 dyads. And this dyadic research is really tricky. And there are several of us who engage in this, because if you think about it, if we capture, our main subject, person living with dementia in the healthcare system, and then we want to enroll their care partner as well, and we want to track care outcomes related to that care partner, and they don't receive healthcare in that same system. I mean, there's just all kinds of challenges that we are tackling in a very real world way through this work. So Greg's team with In Peace did recruit 200 dyads for In Peace. They had about half of those participants in the trial who identified as Black or African American, and they had over 90% retention throughout the trial for all the data collection, et cetera. And then I'm going to completely scoop you, because you've started the analysis, and it looks like it was impactful, and significantly so, on their outcomes around emergency department use and hospitalization. So this is really exciting. There's not been a trial. Like, palliative care is one of these things that makes a lot of sense to people, but we need to do this clinical trials work in order to build the evidence base so that we can get financing for it, can get, Medicare to cover it in all of these settings. So this is, we're going to be hearing a lot more about In Peace soon. Really, really exciting stuff. And then, Kristen, just dyadic's not enough for you. Like, you're doing triadic studies where you're enrolling patients with advanced cancer, their caregivers, but also the providers, and implementing communication interventions to help them have better conversations about supportive care and palliative care. So we've got Lexi up here too. She has multiple funded projects related to the role of the chaplain, again highlighting the interdisciplinary nature of both the care and our research focus and research teams. So I think I'll stop there. I think Noll's up next. Yeah. We're on.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Noll, and I was sitting here listening to, just a ton of content and a ton of activity in palliative care. Thank you to that group. And thinking about how do we transition between palliative care and healthy aging, healthy brains, and deprescribing. And I came up with one word: medications, right? They're a tool to the palliative care population, but they're also an outstanding opportunity for us to learn even more about what we think medications are doing, helping, maybe harming in older adults as it relates to the dementia community. So I'm going to use that as a transition. I'll admit that my colleague, Dr. Rich Holden, who is online but unable to attend today because of responsibilities at the Division of Health and Wellness Design at IU Bloomington today, is listening, and I'm going to allow Rich, I'm going to prime you a little bit if you're able to contribute and let everyone know if I misspoke at all. But our work is focused on somewhat medications, but also really tools and mobile health technology that can help the population with or at risk of dementia. And so I'll use that terminology or medications as a kind of transition point where we talk about the work that the Healthy Aging, Healthy Brains, and Deprescribing group, or Brain Safety Lab as we coin it, is working on. And so I'll start with really, you can see the list of projects here, but we're really focused on what the role medications have. And I want to just kind of throw out some appreciation to the nature of the work starting back almost 20 years within the IU Center for Aging Research. And yes, I'm dating myself. But yes, that's when I also started wearing bow ties, and I thought I'd throw that back out today too. And it's great to see you all here in the audience, and I thought I'd honor that by putting on a bow tie, which I've not done in probably 3 years either. So it's fun. I have to admit that I was a little tough to button this top button compared to 3 years ago too, but we did it and we're here. But many years ago, the IU Center for Aging Research and Regenstrief as a whole had quite the data source that was able to evaluate the impact of medications on certain outcomes. And IUCAR has been able to harness the relationship between medication and cognition since then. And so there has been, in that time, in some of my preliminary work leading up to the things that we're working on now, has established this relationship between medications and adverse cognitive outcomes. We're now finally, after all that time, it seems like you hear Malaz Bustani, who's one of the founders of this areas of work, talk about the 17-year cycle between learning about something and actually having a solution that we implement in the clinical environment. I haven't solved that yet, and I apologize for that. But we're pushed to do better, right? But what we're doing now is we're in that phase of really testing, can we change medicines? How do we change medicines? And if we change medicines, does that improve clinical outcomes? So a lot of the work that the Brain Safety Lab is working on is really focused on those decisions around medications. And I'm going to focus just for a few minutes on those, and then extend that work to the mobile health technology that Rich is leading. But we're really excited to have a couple projects that are focused on deprescribing. And for those who may not be familiar, that is essentially just that, finding users of medicines that we think might be introducing harm in older adults with or at risk of dementia, and finding a way to change those. And again, as I mentioned, this work started 20 years ago. It really did. 20 years ago, we thought, well, one way that we can stop or prevent exposure to high-risk medicines in older adults who have or are at risk of brain disease is just to change the way that physicians are prescribing. Well, it took us 2 R01s or a K and an R01 to realize it's not that simple. And so more recently, because of those failures, we've learned that the decisions around changing medicines that people are using or prescribed takes a bit more of a human presence. And we're fortunate to be able to use those, or at least experiment with human and non-human presence in a couple of these studies. First, the R2D2 study, and second, the Brain Safe study, where we are, in one, using a human to think about the decisions that it takes to get to the point of saying, you're using this medicine today, how do we change that tomorrow so that the symptoms that it's being treated are still cared for, you're still cared for, and the healthcare system recognizes those decisions. The other is, how can we prepare you as the user of those medicines with the education and the tools that you might need to make that decision for yourself in between you and your provider? And that's what Brain Safe is doing. So Brain Safe is providing some of those tools in education and decision making that someone can use on their own. So you can recognize that the R2D2 based intervention is human intensive, it takes time, and it's not really scalable. Well, what's fantastic is we have the opportunity to study the other end of the spectrum, which is mobile health technology, and study a different way. If we have a more scalable intervention, does that provide the same degree of impact and decision making? And so we have a really awesome, exciting opportunity that I know the country nationally and internationally are looking forward to hearing about the results of these studies, not only in the realm of how did you make decisions and how did you impact the way people use medicines, but also what was the clinical outcome when we change those medicines? Was there a change? Because we think that these medicines are associated or causing harm to the brain, but we've never tested those in a prospective way. And there's only one other study that's still undergoing analysis that is studying that. That was only 90 patients. We have 1,000 that we're approaching. So shout out to the R2D2 and Brain Safe study teams. We think in the next month, going to achieve that 1,000 mark and close out maybe 2 months. But nonetheless, it's exciting. We're gonna have 1,000 people compared to 90. And so we're gonna have a really awesome opportunity to learn about the impact of medications and cognitive outcomes. You see a number of other studies here. There's a MyCare study. One of the areas of expertise that our group has is in working with medication data sources. We've worked with self-report. We've worked with INPC data sources, EMR data sources, and in the MyCare study, this is a clinical trial run with partners, collaborators at HSR, as well as collaborators at Kaiser University in Washington, where we're understanding the impact of collaborative care models, also an area of expertise from Regenstrief and Dr. Kurt Kroenke in managing opioid use disorders as well as depression. But in that study, we have an opportunity to work with inspect data, so opioid data. And these are, again, as you might recognize, large data sets. And I hate to say it, but it's taken me a long time to realize the number of variables. As a pharmacist, as a clinically trained pharmacist, it's taken me this long to understand the number of variables and how to use the variables in these multitude of data sets. So I recently learned that there are 85 variables that can be associated with ordering medications in an EMR. I actually didn't know there were that many until just last week. Up until now, I've worked with what I thought I needed, but I didn't know that there were so many available. And now we have to figure out how to use them. What do we need, and how do we make those useful? So there's still a lot of opportunities to learn, but those areas of expertise extend into sleep, they extend into opioid use disorders, they extend into geriatric education through the IU GWEP program. So our program has a multitude of opportunities and responsibilities. But I'll start to kind of close out by saying, and again, Rich, I'm going to prime you again if you're able to contribute and you want to offer a minute of additional comment here. That it was a fantastic opportunity to work with, to begin working with Rich through the Brain Safety Lab, which was a P30 program grant from AHRQ that Dan Clark and Chris Callahan led. That really was the basis for what our lab is today. And we learned through that, because of our failures, thinking that we could just change the way prescribers prescribe medicines by just changing the way that they order them. In failing in that, we recognized the need for us to work with somebody who can help us solve problems in a more reasonable way. And we got the opportunity to bring in Rich Holden, and Rich's mind in thinking about healthcare engineering has been really fantastic. So Rich and I joke that I'm an honorary engineer and Rich is an honorary pharmacist because of the collaboration that we've had over several years. But in that, Rich has really helped us use mobile health technology, think about how we solve problems at the individual level, think about the decisions that are being made when we solve these problems, and really think about, here's why your first 2 studies failed. Here's why you failed for 10 years, which we didn't have that ability. And so we had to bring in a fresh set of eyes, a fresh set of thinking. And because of that, you can see the projects that Rich is leading, is collaborating on and helping the helpers, OTC senior stations. We're actually getting into real-world pharmacies and working with Walgreens to introduce some interventions out in the real world. Who thought you could crack the doors of Walgreens? We tried, right, several times for several years. We couldn't, but we think we're creating tools that even Walgreens is going to be interested in. And that has a dissemination possibility that's just immense. And so through that technology and through Rich's expertise, we've been able to expand that mobile health technology and that decision-making technology out to a much more scalable opportunity when taking these lessons into a population that we think can really help. So I'm going to stop there. Rich, I promised you a minute. If you can unmute, or if you're available, I'll give you just a short period here if you want to contribute anything else. Otherwise, we will move next into, I believe, comments, questions, and clarifications.
Great job. I don't have that much to add. The only maybe 2 things that I want to highlight, though, are a lot of this is actually behavior change. This is it's not just come up with an intervention, check it out, put a drug in somebody. But when we're talking about deprescribing, this is massive behavior change, just like exercise, just like diet, just like, mental health. And then number 2 is we're working a lot on intervention development. And as it turns out, again, intervention development for behavior change is challenging. It requires a rigorous process and often multidisciplinary approaches, because the problems are not solvable by one discipline or one strategy. And so if there's one thing that I can kind of let other people know that has been a kind of a joy in my life, career for the last 10 years at IU, and then beyond that, it's been multidisciplinary collaboration with, Noll, a pharmacist with a lot of geriatricians, physicians, nursing faculty, and social work, informatics, you name it. So so teamwork makes the dream work.
Thanks, Rich. All right, thank you all for your attention, and I'll advance to the next slide.
Great, thank you so much to Noll, Kathleen, Sikandar, and Babar, and Rich. I'm going to close by just sharing some of the goals that we have identified for IUCAR for the upcoming year. And specifically, we, as has been suggested in some of the highlights of our work, we have long included and had pretty high representation of traditionally underrepresented minorities within our research, although it's not necessarily been the case that our studies have specifically set out to address issues related to health disparities and equity research. I think with the exception of Dan Clark's portfolio, that has been, however, part of what has been really one of the benefits of our longstanding collaboration with Eskenazi specifically. We are interested in intentionally and planning on intentionally growing our portfolio in this area and have a couple things in the works. Additionally, one of the conversations we had at our faculty retreat, we initially sort of bucketed this separate and decided, no, we really need to make sure that we integrate this into everything that we're doing and all aspects of what we're doing. Our language and our grants, even how we describe who we are as a center, as a institute, as faculty. And so that's one of our goals for the upcoming year, is really turning in a real intentional eye about how we communicate what we're doing to the external world, and then also highlight and weave that into the work we're doing forward. We also have had numerous conversations about the development of a community advisory board, and that was actually one of my goals when I started as a center director in 2019, and then we had, the small pandemic sort of disrupted some of the things that we thought we were going to do. But we think this is more important than ever. And so we are having ongoing conversations about this, looking at different models with the plan to create really a thoughtful and intentional community advisory board structure. So stay tuned, more to come on that. We are also interested always in strengthening and expanding our collaborations to support aging research. And one of the challenges that we've run into is when we are really productive with our grants, we start sort of competing with each other for recruitments. And so one of the things that's become really clear out of the work we've done over the last 5 years is how essential it is that we're thinking really broadly about our opportunities to recruit and collaborate with different organizations. And there have been several investigators who've done a really nice job of this and building partnerships with our area agencies on aging, for example, and hospitals up in the Fort Wayne area. We've had a lot of growth in this area, but a continued effort is needed. And then finally, we have a couple of people who are planning program and project grants, which are sort of larger grants. And in fact, we just had a really large infrastructure grant that Kathleen led that went in that aligns with that goal really nicely. So we're really excited about the opportunities here. And these are, of course, on top of all of our other goals, including supporting our amazing faculty and continuing to find opportunities for growth and career development for our staff. So we have just a few minutes, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments, and they can be directed to me or any one of our speakers. So thanks so much. Any questions? I'm getting crickets in the room. So I'm curious about online. If there's anything, I don't know who's monitoring that. Beth is shaking her head no. All right, well, hopefully you feel like you have a better understanding of what we're doing on the 4th floor. After today, thank you all for attending, both in person and online. It's really a pleasure to have an opportunity to showcase the work that we're doing and hopefully give you some better familiarity with our investigators and staff and how IUCAR operates. So thank you so much.